place where you're kind of put up with an existential dilemma because you're rooting for your character after all this time because you're having done something.
Yeah.
It's just kind of, I don't know, I let the season feel not knowing how I should feel about it.
Good. I always want it to be confusing in that regard, because it's a mixed bag, Good people do bad things, bad people do. I mean, I would rather avoid that essential kind of unanswerable question in most cases about who's good versus who's bad. I mean, it's certainly true that Smith represents that. He represents Nazism, which is obviously bad, but within that, he's a human being, or at least I'm trying to make him a human being. So that there's someone who had history worked out a different way would be John Smith, the guy, like even within his world, he's a hero, but in the alternative, which is our world, you would never question that he was a good guy at all. It wouldn't. He doesn't have, and I will always resist the implication that he is someone whose natural proclivities towards violence and evil have been put to good use, but someone who, like most humans, has those things in him, which have been, as it does, which is the job it does, eked out by Nazism, which have been, brought to the fore by the system he lives in, because that's what that system does. So anything that confuses people, I don't know whether I think, that feels like it's working for me,
It has actually, because the conclusion of both seasons so far, and I understand where you're coming from with the uncomfortableness for an American viewer, it's a little difficult to be sitting and rooting for your character who was a Nazi.
I know.
And going, wow, it would have been way worse.
Well, but that is the thing in terms of relativism. I mean, it's one of the difficult, kind of slightly thorny questions that one has when, playing a part like this. What is my responsibility? What's, like, morally, what was my position? And I, decided a long time ago, instinctively actually, that my instinct was that the most responsible thing to do as a human is to portray him as much of a human as possible, because what we need to remind ourselves of is that we as humans are capable of this. We all are, as is demonstrated. All we need to do is be sufficiently convinced of our own victimhood, and it excuses things that were previously inexcusable, and incrementally we can other people to the extent that as victims we become monsters. And I think that's the essential story. Not that anyone's hectoring anyone with a lesson, but that's what it happens to be about. That's what it was about in 1962. I wish it wasn't getting more on the nose, but we're not trying to be on the nose. It's just the story is what it, as someone said earlier in an interview, actually there are little storylines that they had planned that they had to take out because it seemed like we put them in especially. I don't mean to draw too close a parallel between like Nazism and what's going on now, but just in terms of the little things that happen. There was a storyline, about putting up a wall, for example, which got taken away because, I as an audience member would be like, oh, come on, guys, don't patronise me. So certain things, tellingly, we've actually had to kind of tone down because we don't want to sit, which weren't put in for that reason, but end up having parallels in the world.
Without spoiling what's coming up in season 3, but what most excited you about some of the themes and the journey that your character gets to go towards in the season?
Well, for me, a continuation of what was already happening, of his doubts and the kind of chickens coming home to roost, of this pact that he made that he felt was morally the right decision, to side with the other side because he felt that was probably, either we're going to let the Nazis nuke every city or we're going to capitulate and my family will be safe. It's the best thing. To him, he made that decision and he hitched his wagon, to use another expression, not quite sure of, to something that, in order to protect his family, that turns around and said, okay, now we're going to have your children one at a time. Well, that seems to be the question. The irony of that, the horror of that, is not lost on him, whether it ends up being reflected in the writing or not, that's what's underneath. And the idea of being able to tell that story of him, his ascendancy in the world and his descent internally and that conflict. I mean, I'm talking a big game, it's probably not coming across. But that's what I was, you'll see all of this in my performance. No, not necessarily. But that was what appealed and still potentially appeals to me about that. And also, the slow cracking open of the idea of other worlds and a world in which maybe things had turned out differently becomes more of a presence to him, and it has a growing power over it for various reasons.
Do you think the science fiction elements of the show and pulling on Philip K. Dick's work, do you think that is making the show more powerful for the viewer to kind of turn that otherworldliness up in this season?
I don't know. In this season, yes, but I'm in two minds about that, because I think that is one of the things that makes it really special. But I think what has made it special is the fact that we've been economical with that. That for the first season, yes, we established this huge conceit that it is an alternate history, an alternate world, but we stick with that long enough for the currency to have some value. If you start leaping around into different realities, flash forward, flashback, dream sequences. I don't know if you've ever seen any films where they have too much of that. The effect is, after a while, there's no currency to the moment, because you think, it's probably a dream, or he's going to die, but in the other reality he'll be fine. So it just, you withdraw your commitment to it. So they kept that back long enough, and then just slowly started to eke in these elements, and now it's grabbing hold, and this thing is transmogrifying into a slightly different kind of story, which I think is really exciting. I wanted to hold off on the idea of alternate possibilities for Smith until we had a really strong hold on his dilemma in this world before you crack it open, and it's beginning to crack open slightly now.
So when you're approaching this, obviously being a Nazi is probably not something that you're really excited about in the very beginning, but Juliana, how do you prepare yourself to be that person?
How do I prepare myself to be that person?
As an actor?
Well, I try to do the opposite of what you're assuming, probably. Rather than try to think like a Nazi, I try to think like me as much as possible, whenever possible, because otherwise you find yourself using half-remembered, borrowed, second-hand ideas and letting them inform what you're doing. People would turn up for one day to do a day play or whatever, and you find that they speak in a certain way, and they do this with their gloves, and they walk in a certain way, and everything becomes like Nazi. Whereas if you do the opposite of that every time, again, I'm talking a big game, but if you do the opposite of that, every time you can not have cutlery and have a sandwich, and every time you can do anything that a dad does, or be like an American, or be a bloke, and do which way would a Nazi have their ice cream? Don't do that. So that you just, rather than place yourself at a remove, try to think in terms of how would I convince myself that I was a good guy and do this? What stories would I tell myself? How would I, And if you surround yourself with people who support your bullshit, see fame, for example, you can start to, something that starts as a pose can become real, And I think, it starts off being something he does as a survival mechanism, but it just seeps into his skin,
How much do you think what's happening today is informing his decisions in the now of the story?
Well, I think that what's happening with his son and with the connotations for the rest of his family inform everything he does at all times. Sometimes, however, he might find that he's doing things without thinking. because it's just become habit. But he tells himself that that's why. Maybe, but this doesn't have the answer. Maybe that's the way it started off, and maybe it just becomes something automatic. But as far as he's concerned, that's the reason he does everything, and it certainly affects, pretty much everything.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
More importantly, how are you?
Oh, we're doing good. Long day for us, but it's really exciting to be able to talk about the show like this.
And you're just joining the show, too.
Yeah.
You want to find out a little bit about this mysterious character.
Yeah. How much do you want to know?
What are you allowed to tell us?
Tell us all the things.
Not a whole lot. So I play a character called Wyatt Price, who's an Irish immigrant, came to the States and has escaped to the neutral zone to get away from the Nazi threat, and he's sort of set up this black market business in a bar called the Palace Bar in Denver in the neutral zone, and he offers goods and services, massive network that he's created, and he's sort of thriving in the obviously it's a very difficult situation for everybody. He's found a way to kind of do more than just survive. He's actually kind of
Rise above where he was before.
well, he's trying to make the best of a bad situation, I think, to be fair to say. And that's when he meets Juliana. I think it's fair to say, without giving away too much, that his life will be changed forever when they meet. And they also get on very well, don't they?
They do.
Yeah, that first scene was that was fun to do. That was a big first scene. It was also my first day on the season, so it was a bit nerve-wracking, but
you were brilliant. We threw him straight in the deep end, and it was like he'd been there all along. So
it's a big scene. Like Wyatt and Juliana's scene together is a big scene, big long scene, and lots of we set up their arc really essentially for the whole season. So it was really important.
So thematically leading question for both of them. So the third season of the show is always an interesting place for new people to join and people who've been with the show a long time. So what's still most exciting about you, without spoiling too much going forward, the themes of the show for your character, and what was the hook for you to take on the project?
Do you want to start?
yeah, sure. It's such an incredibly broad landscape, this show. There's really so many ways we could go with it, and there are endless possibilities, being that we're not just dealing with this reality, we're dealing with infinite realities, parallel realities, and that they're all happening simultaneously. So there's this incredible kind of tapestry of aspects that we can play with. And so the third season kind of starts to dive much deeper into the mythology and into PKD and his sort of notions of reality and how much of reality is out there and how much of it is in your head. And Juliana starts to sort of siphon these visions, if you will, from these films, and starts to actually have memories from these other places. So it's been really fun. Yeah.
And I was always a Philip K. Dick fan, and read a lot of the books. I think I read this one a long time ago in college, and I always thought it'd be a great adaptation, but no one seemed to want to go near it. And then I'd read that they'd picked it up and they were turning it into a TV series, but I hadn't seen it. So when they approached me about perhaps being involved, I got to watch both seasons sort of back to back, and that's what's great about Amazon. You can just download them and watch them all in one sitting and binge watch them. And I just thought, I thought the acting was superb. It was just top-notch TV and premium television, if you like. So yeah, I jumped at the chance to be a part of it.
So this season's been long awaited and highly anticipated. How has it felt to just have to keep on the down low so much information for such a long time, waiting for the new season to come out?
Well, actually, this is the hardest it's been because we're getting grilled by you guys, and there's still so much we can't say.
Yeah.
And there'll be some quite big reveals at the panel today, for example, but that's not for us to reveal. It's for the big wigs to do their thing. thing. So yeah, it's tough right now because there's so much we want to tell you, and we're not allowed. But I think it's fair to say we're really relieved that they're going to release the premiere date, because a lot of people ask,
They want to know when
is season 3. So
and it's so wonderful that people still want to know. It's been a long, long time. You know, it's a lot to ask of an audience, certainly, to wait such a long time. And the fact that they're curious and still care is thank you, everyone. Thank you for bearing with us. Yeah, it's been a long time coming. So.
So we left Juliana with rather unusual relation of her down. How is that going to shape her actions going forward? Is she second guessing herself a lot more, or is she just going to kind of get you all these stars?
I mean, she now has an entirely different playing field, if you will. You know, she's got a different deck of cards now because she's got this awareness and this, you know, having Trudy put in front of her by Abenson was very much about, I think, you know, my interpretation of it at least, was to sort of open that door of perception so that she could see what is too abstract to grasp otherwise, you know. So to be able to see this alt version of her sister, to see the sister, means it's possible and it's real and you can touch her. You know, that just blew the doors right open for her, and I think she's then been able to sort of start tapping into all these other pieces. So she has a lot of breadcrumbs, if you will. She's learning a lot from all these things that are hard for anyone to understand, really, but her. They're in her mind.
Following the trail. Yeah.
When you talk about like the perception and like the ideas like that are coming from your mind and Philip K. Dick's like writings on that, did you dig into like his exegesis and things like that?
I want to eat all of his work, honestly, because once you start, it's like you can't. There's nowhere to. You can't stop. The man was prolific and so incredibly productive. 4 or 5 books a year.
That's how he wrote it. Yeah.
I mean, it would just come out of him. It was almost like a channeling, you know, more than anything else. And it's been so cool to be able to really, you know, maintain the integrity of his legacy ultimately, because that's what we're doing. We're fighting as hard as we can to make sure that we do him justice and that his themes and his thoughts are represented correctly. You know, because it's all interpretation, really. But we've got Issa, we've got his daughter, you know, here, and.
Have you talked to Issa yet?
Not yet.
Oh,
Yeah.
so amazing to have someone so.
Is it fascinating to be able to kind of tap into like her knowledge of Dick and
Of him. Oh, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so cool.
What's that? I was curious because when we're introduced to Juliana, she's more swept up in events.
Sure.
She's reactionary. She's not necessarily proactive. But as the series has continued, you've got to flex more muscle and actually take control of some of these phases. How important is that to an actor? That it's sort of like, oh yes, I get to play the wet noodle again. Well, you're not a wet noodle for very long.
You know, I got to say, there's a lot to discover in that sort of how you would describe that is maybe different how I would describe it as far as you know, someone who's being swept up with things that happens to us. You know, and we are subject to life sometimes, and there's a lot of beauty in that. So to start there that way with her, I think was really important because it's given me somewhere to go with her and somewhere to build to, and ultimately to bring her back to the book, because you know, if we started in that place, it would have been sort of a backward engineering, and ultimately it had to be somewhat chronological. So yeah, all these things and all this experience has absolutely shaped her as it would.
And it's cool to watch. I'm hoping to see more flexing of your muscle, I guess.
Well, thanks, man. I can't give your time back, so I hope you enjoy it when you do see it. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Great talking to you. Cheers.
Especially good. So one of the big challenges must be telling this Broadway story. We've got people all over the world at this point, and it's hard to keep the characters connected. And obviously, you get that characters together. Juliana and Joe come back together. So how is it? kind of juggling all of that story around, and are we hopefully going to see more of the characters in the same space again?
For you.
Yes, we will. I mean, the end of season 2, we separated Juliana, Joe, and Frank, and season 3, the architect of season 3, brings all their fates back together in surprising ways, unpredictable ways. But you also begin to understand in season 3 how Juliana functions as the center of all these lives across many, many universes. And that's a very weird and ambiguous thing to say, but her connection to all these characters is infinite. And we begin to give a glimpse into that and why she is such a unique individual.
No, well, we don't know. I said, your father's work is like incredibly expansive and pivotal to science fiction. What's it like being able to put his vision into something that's a visual medium when he has such massive ideas to deal with?
Well, it's a total privilege and a joy, especially when I have great partners, on these shows. I am surprised that we've had as many adaptations as we've had, because based on Blade Runner's failure, which I don't know if you know that, it was a complete failure. I said to my mom, we left the theater, and I said, nobody will ever make another movie based on my dad's, in tears, based on my dad's work. That's changed. But no, for me, the work that I do is a way to channel grief in a positive way. And I'm just delighted that so many people respond to it, so many artists in particular. It makes my job a lot easier.
In the current kind of political climate the whole world is in, with the rise of kind of a new version of fascism and extreme nationalism, how do you think your father would have reacted to the world right now?
I think he would be apoplectic. High Castle is an anti-fascist tale. He had such deep fears and anxieties about fascism, and he always described it as the enemy. So I think if it feels like we're living in one of his novels at this point, more so every day, because things are so bizarre and troubling. So I think it'd be really painful for him. Hopefully we come out the other side. But yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
How important is it, as the series does kind of veer from about his work, how important is it to try to keep in the vein that he built in? Because there are things that go on in the series that aren't in the books. There are vast differences.
You mean on High Castle? Like in terms of the way we're expanding it?
Yes.
Yeah.
How do you face the challenge of making sure that it stays true to his vision?
I always say that we aim for fidelity in spirit, and according to the themes that he cared most about, which were, the nature of reality and what it means to be human. Those are really important themes throughout. And when I partner with people, and I pick partners very carefully, I really believe in empowering them to bring their A game, to do something special with it, and to, a lot of these stories were written in the 50s and during Cold War and all of that stuff, and so to be able to modernize and find a different way of telling those stories is as critical to modernize it. But I have to say, I haven't really had any issues with that with the groups of people I've worked with, and mostly because they're so collaborative, so we can have these conversations like, would that be contrary to what he would think or what he would write, and we just don't do that. We don't go that way, and people have been very supportive of that.
The third season of any show is an exciting place to be, because you've had an opportunity to build this world over the first 6 seasons. Without spoiling, but giving us some teasers of things, what things surprised you in your collaborations with the writers' room and producers about where certain people on your team wanted to take themes further, take tendrils further as we go through the third season?
Well, I think I mean, to be honest, it's a constant dialogue between writers, production, the cast themselves about all the things you passionately want to investigate and grow and build on. But at the same time, there is a natural progression to character arcs. And one of the things that I think all of us really want to do with season 3 was drill back down into the character lives, into what motivates people individually, about what it was like, what it's actually like to live in this world. And it's been delightful to see. I think season 3 gets back into character a lot more, rather than this kind of big cerebral mission ideas before. But also, I mean, some of the really big ideas. The really big idea of this season is also inspired by unpublished work by.
Oh, right, to that question, that very question. Yeah, we took my dad started a sequel, so he has material to Man in High Castle. Couldn't get back into that Nazi space. It just was too devastating. But he did have a big idea there that we were able to utilize in season 3. So I'm very excited about that. New stuff.
Having access to his unpublished work, like, are you able to kind of constantly glean ideas and just concepts for the show, from a lot of that? Because I know, with the collection of his exegesis and things like that, there's so many huge concepts in there that haven't been dealt with anywhere. So
yeah, the exegesis is much more. You probably know what it is his own. His own trying to figure out what had happened with him spiritually and with his visions and all of that stuff. So there isn't a lot of narrative stuff, but it is more as thinking about religion, spirituality, and things like that. But you could read it and you could get a general sense of the way in which he thought and what was important to him. And so in that regard, you can make sure to infuse things with that. But I wouldn't never really take, say for example, and I'm not sure if this is what you mean, but I wouldn't really take another story and use that concept and bring it into High Castle, for example. Unless we're doing an anthology, which we did.
Right.
And in that case, with each episode is a short story.
Right.
More?
But was the season really intense?
It gets really intense.
And you came to this place where with characters who were villains for much of the series, you sympathized with them, and they actually did something that was in a way the greater good. Can you talk about developing that and just making these characters human, even if they are?
I think it would be a failure of the show if we didn't show that good people are capable of evil things. It's very easy to dismiss Nazis as monsters or fools or crazies or lunatics of one kind or another, or just like terrorism can be dismissed as lunatic fringe or religious fanatics. It's not true. Every human being is capable of good and evil, and just given the circumstances and the choices that we may not have to make in our lives, but if you were living a different life you would have to make, can force you down a road, down a path where you are complicit in horrors. And many people in many countries, in the Second World War went through those choices and had to confront them. And they may want to pretend it never happened now, but it did. And we must never allow ourselves to think that fascism can't come out of good society and good people, because that's exactly where it comes from.
Thank you. Thanks for your interest.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks again for watching The Daily Dope, presented by The Gaming Gang. If you like this episode, be sure to give it a quick thumbs up. And if you dig the channel, please subscribe. If you'd like to check out our previous episode, click right here. And if you want to check out a somewhat randomly selected episode, give a click right down here. It'll be like opening a box of Cracker Jacks. You just don't know what you'll get. Once again, thanks for watching, and I'm Jeff McAleer.